Few leaders in history stand taller than Alexander the Great of Macedon. In just over a decade of conquest, this young king created an empire that stretched from Greece to India, changing the course of history forever. Alexander was born in 356 BC to King Philip II of Macedon and Queen Olympias. As a boy, Alexander was tutored by the great philosopher Aristotle, sparking his lifelong love of learning. But it was in military matters that the young Alexander excelled. At age 16, he commanded part of his father's army, leading cavalry forces to victory and displaying courage and tactical brilliance. When his father was assassinated in 336 BC, the 20-year-old Alexander swiftly seized the Macedonian throne. Now king, Alexander wasted no time in embarking on his pan-Hellenic project to invade and unite the fractious Greek city-states. After threatening and diplomatically coercing their allegiance, Alexander turned his eyes eastward to the mighty Persian Empire, Greece's ancient enemy. In 334 BC, Alexander crossed the Hellespont into Persian territory with an army of 35,000 Macedonian and Greek soldiers. He first faced major resistance at the Granicus River, where he faced 40,000 Persian cavalry and Greek mercenaries. Showing his signature aggression, Alexander led the decisive cavalry charge, punching a hole in the enemy lines and winning the day. Alexander continued down the Mediterranean coast, freeing Greek cities from Persian rule. In 333 BC at Issus, he met the Persian king Darius III on the battlefield. Though outnumbered 2-1, Alexander exploited weak points in the Persian lines, even targeting the chariot of Darius himself, who panicked and fled. It was a crushing victory, leaving the Persian army in tatters and opening the way into the empire's heartland. Next, Alexander descended south, conquering Issus and Egypt. In Egypt, Alexander was crowned pharaoh and proclaimed son of the god Amun. He founded the city of Alexandria, envisioning it as a cultural and commercial hub. Leaving garrisons and outposts in his wake, Alexander continued his march east against Darius. At the Battle of Gargumela in 331 BC, Alexander faced Darius once more, this time with a massive Persian force said to number 200,000 or more. Again facing long odds, Alexander drew the Persians into an ambush, attacking Darius's flanks and sparking their collapse. Darius fled, and Alexander marched triumphantly into Babylon and Susa, making Persia his own. Alexander spent the next 2 years securing his vast conquests. He suppressed rebellions, founded cities like Bactra and Kandahar, and married Roxana, a local princess. Ever curious, Alexander questioned Indian philosophers, Chaldean priests, and the wisdom of the regions he traversed. By 329 BC, the time came to press on into India itself. After defeating King Porus along the Hydaspes River, Alexander's troops reached the Beas River near modern Lahore, India. But here, his army could march no further. After 8 hard years of war, they demanded a return home. Reluctantly, Alexander agreed, but not before embarking on a brutal 2-year march back to Babylon through the Gedrosian desert, reputedly as a punishment. While securing his empire, Alexander continued to study, explore, and unveil grand architectural projects. He introduced Hellenistic culture, founding new cities while also respecting local traditions. But Alexander was never satisfied. He yearned to explore the Caspian Sea region and master the Western Mediterranean by taking Carthage and moving on Rome. However, fate had other plans. In 323 BC, after 12 years of conquest, Alexander the Great died suddenly in Babylon at just 32 years old, likely from malaria or other feverish illness. On his deathbed, when asked who should inherit his empire, he simply replied, "The strongest." This began the destructive wars of the Diadochi, as Alexander's generals carved up his empire. But Alexander's legacy was now indelibly etched in history. He had established a model of rulership and conquest that inspired Caesar, Napoleon, and countless others. Alexander embraced Greek culture, yet also integrated Persian and Eastern customs, setting the stage for the diverse Hellenistic era. He masterfully forged a professional army that fought with shocking skill and precision. His 70 cities dotted across his empire became centers of culture and commerce. Alexander possessed boundless ambition, personal courage, and intellectual curiosity. He led men not just through conquest but shared hardship and study. His lust for discovery sent his historians, engineers, and scholars to the very ends of the earth. Alexander yearned not just to conquer, but to know. Above all, Alexander dreamed big. Against staggering odds, he led a relatively small Macedonian force to defeat the mighty Persian Empire, immeasurably changing the ancient world. For centuries after, ambitious leaders measured themselves against the legend of Alexander the Great. Alexander possessed many flaws, to be sure, from bursts of self-destructive rage to megalomania. But for better or worse, his conquests marked the dawn of the Hellenistic age and the beginning of the end for the old city-state political system. His legacy made Greek culture dominant well beyond Greece itself. Modern scholars debate endlessly whether Alexander was ultimately a visionary or a destructive tyrant. But there is no debating the enormity of his accomplishments. His many victories against the odds read like something out of myth. But Alexander knew he was making myth and actively cultivated his image for posterity during his own lifetime. In just over a decade, Alexander created a vast empire across Anatolia, Egypt, Persia, and all the way to India. He founded nearly 20 cities bearing his name and introduced Greek political administration, culture, and commerce everywhere he went. He embraced Eastern customs, attempted to unite people, and brought stability to war-ravaged lands. But he also slaughtered entire cities, took grave risks, and was wildly ambitious to the point of delusion. His early death left chaos in his wake as his generals fought over the rubble of his fractured empire. But the lands he conquered were forever changed. His footprint can be seen across Eurasia to this day, from currency bearing his image to surviving remnants of his cities. Alexander's tutor Aristotle warned him not to lose proportion and make more enemies than he could handle. Ultimately, many scholars argue Alexander's ambition exceeded his ability to manage his sprawling domain long term, but others contend his vision of unifying East and West was both ahead of his time and an influence on empires to follow. At just 32 years old, the man who believed he was the son of Zeus had conquered more territory than any before. But with so much ambition left unfulfilled upon his early death, his ultimate legacy is perhaps the eternal question of what more he could have achieved had he lived longer. How much further would Alexander have pressed on? We will never know. Over 2,000 years later, Alexander endures as a towering figure in world history. His superhuman feats of military conquest and skill for his age still amaze us. But while Alexander conquered immense territory, he could not conquer time. The man who had achieved so much so young would ultimately run out of time to prove whether he was a visionary leader or simply a ruthless conqueror. Alexander's dramatic life shows just how much the trajectory of history pivots upon the vision, ambition, and flaws of one extraordinary individual.